What's that story you've never been able to tell? This is probably going to get lost, but I just want to put it out into the void. I'm a recovering drug addict. I dropped out of school but would still show up on campus to pick up drugs or meet people. I was sitting outside the cafe one night waiting on some pills. I weighed 100 pounds soaking wet and hadn't eaten in days. There was this girl in the honors program with me when I was still enrolled, and we had many classes in that program together. She was a unique young lady. My friend and I bullied her in the past and didn't try to hide it. She walked by and asked me how I was, and I was so clearly sick. There was an awkward silence, and she asked me if she could buy me some food. She took me into the cafe and bought me a cookie. I said thank you, and we parted ways. I cried so hard that night. I was overwhelmed with guilt and gratitude and shame. I never saw her again. That was about 8 years ago, and I remember it clearly, down to what I was wearing. I don't remember her name, but I will never forget her kindness. It was a bright moment in an otherwise sad time in my life. Wherever she is, I wish I could thank her. Back when I was in high school, I wanted to approach this girl on a bus on my way to school. She was really hot, and I knew I'd regret it if I didn't approach her. There was one big problem. There was a middle-aged lady seated next to her, and I couldn't talk to this girl with the lady right next to her. I had to think of a quick way to get rid of the lady. I then woke up from my seat, slowly walked to the row they were seated, and calmly asked the lady, "Excuse me, ma'am, could you please let me sit next to my sister?" Turns out the lady was the girl's mom. When I was in kindergarten, I fell asleep on the bus to school. No one woke me up. I wake up eventually, and the bus is empty. I panic, as any 5-year-old does, and run to the front of the bus and try the door. It's locked. It was parked in a KFC parking lot, so people were coming in and out of the building. I started wailing with terror, banging on the glass doors, snot pouring down my face and into my mouth as people walked by and pointed at me. They mumbled and got into their car and left. By the time the bus driver finally came back out with her chicken meal, the entire door was covered in my slobber and tears. She instructed me how to open the closed door so she didn't have to put her meal down. I was still freaking out, obviously, and didn't understand. So she sighed, put her food down, and finally opened the door and asked me what was I doing there. She called the school and drove me there, still covered in snot. I remember walking into my class with everyone standing in a line and hugging me one at a time. After that day, they made a rule for all bus drivers to get up and walk the bus front to back to make sure no kids get left sleeping. I found out when I was 28 that my dad's side of the family had been in the witness protection program my entire life, and that their names were not what I had been told. About 6 months ago, I was very close to suicide. I actually was about to do it, thinking about killing myself, and at one point I had agreed to myself I would end it. I got home that night, and it was just me and my cat as my fiancée was at work. My cat, I think she knew I was sad, and she never sits in people's laps, sat up in my lap and proceeded to flip on her belly and play wrestle with my hand. I broke down for about 3 hours. My fiancée came home knowing none the wiser, but had brought my favorite dish from her work, brewery, because she knew I was feeling down. I've never told her that was the night I decided not to pull the trigger. Just want to put a little edit out there. Y'all are all too kind. I tried replying to as much as possible, and it's good to know there are so many kind souls out there. If you ever feel the same way I did, be sure to find someone who will listen. It can be me if you want, or the suicide hotline, anything. Just know the world is a better place with you in it. Stay strong. Remember when the world was supposed to end on December 21st, 2012? That night, a bunch of my friends and I were hanging out in my apartment, smoking a lot of weed and playing games. We made a bunch of jokes about the world not having ended. I was pretty young and dumb, so I actually had some anxiety about that. It felt good to laugh it off. We go on my balcony to have a cigarette and watch the sunset. Out of nowhere, there's an enormous explosion, and the sky flashes lime green. We all stop talking and stare as the sky flashes green, pink, yellow, and there are these crazy, indescribable crackling noises. I'm stoned as a bitch, and I decide this is it. It's happening. I go into emergency preparedness mode for the alien invasion, and for some reason start filling my bathtub with water. I think it was so we'd have water to drink if we were hiding from aliens, and the water lines got interrupted? I'm stupid. We all run around yelling and freaking the fuck out for about 5 minutes while the sky continues to strobe neon colors. So what had happened was a transformer blew somewhere nearby. No idea that this was what happened in that circumstance, but due to the date, I was not the only one to lose it. My mother was out, and one of her companions fell to her knees and started praying the rosary for the second coming when the sky started changing colors. Never found a good time to share that story, but it cracks me up and I still catch shit for the fucking bathtub. When I was a college freshman, I tried to boil 3 eggs, then fell asleep. I woke up to a smell. I went to the stove and the water was completely gone from the pot. So like an idiot, I got some water in a big bowl and poured it into the pot. You probably know where this is going. The eggs exploded like dynamite. Scalding hot egg hit my face. It blew me back and knocked me to the floor. Here's the scary part. I felt my face and looked at the egg on my finger, but thought it was burnt skin coming off my face. I almost started crying. How badly burned was I that my facial skin came off to the touch? I walked to the bathroom, shaking, and looked in the mirror. I expected to see a horribly disfigured face, but I saw egg and eggshells. I wiped it with my hand and felt incredible relief. I also felt incredibly stupid, but so what, right? I spent the next hour cleaning egg off the ceiling, the walls, the floor, etc. My face was red for a couple days. 6 years ago, I was in Svalbard. Walking to my accommodation out of town with shopping in light snow midwinter. Little visibility. A guy on a snowmobile drives up behind me and asked where my gun was. They suggest you always have one for polar bears. I didn't have one, and he was like, "You crazy, get on the snowmobile. There's a polar bear in town." So I did, shopping bags and all. Lucky me, 2014. It was my first night in college. My roommates, strangers, didn't show up. We lived in a 3-story apartment complex with 4 apartments each level in a freshman building. Well, the neighbors are partying, and I get out of my comfort zone and walk outside. Outside, some guys are drinking, and one of the guys invites me in to party, and so begins my college experience. Lo and behold, I get wasted, just like many of the others. I head back to my apartment on the same level, and the party has moved slightly to my apartment. But there are just like 6 people there. I start asking people to leave as I'm going to bed, but I'm so drunk, I know I don't care if they stay or go. I go to my room and there is a guy crashed in it. I tell him he doesn't need to leave, but please move over, and he does. I wake up and freak out because I have a boyfriend. I check to make sure we didn't have sex. "No, but you came into my apartment asking everyone to leave and told me I could stay in your bed and hopped in." Confused, I ask him to clarify. "Dude, this isn't your apartment." Took about 30 seconds to realize I just arrived at the wrong apartment and slept in a stranger's bed. My first night in college. The time my mom needed to go back into the house to get a scarf. Because of this, we were held back and missed a bus by 10 seconds. That bus then crashed into a bridge at very high speed because the bus driver had mental health problems. It is the closest I have ever been to death. I will never complain about my mom going back to get a scarf in my life again. Around 42 years ago, my little brother was playing with matches and set the woods on fire. Burned about 10 acres. Everyone assumed that it was me smoking in the woods, so he and I just let it be me. I took the blame and the ass whooping because Dad was kinda rough on the ass whoopings when he was mad, and I didn't want my little brother to have to take it. Being that Dad got a little carried away this time, broke my arm, we've just never told anyone the truth. I nearly died at work. I was removing the main supply, 200 volts, 3-phase wire on the machine we just successfully overhauled. The problem is, I wasn't aware that the main circuit breaker was still turned on. I already had the gut feeling to check the breaker, but I was stubborn and proceeded to remove the wires. As I removed the second wire, I accidentally short-circuited it, creating a huge spark right in front of my eyes. First thing I did was to check my hand, which was thankfully unharmed, but had visible dark spots due to the strong electric current on the short-circuiting of the wires. Good thing I was half-conscious and went on to turn off the main circuit breaker. Some of my workmates saw and approached me while asking if everything was all right. After removing the wire, I took a walk and had a deep thought what might happen to me if those wires touched me. I might have suffered a severe 3rd-degree burn, or lose a limb, or died from electrocution. Folks, always be careful and always trust your gut feeling. Teacher in training here. All the children I work with have classes that separated from the main school because they have slightly different educational needs. I was talking to a main teacher on the first day with my class about the students and how I should act around them in order to keep everyone calm and happy, and we ended up bringing the conversation to a student. Let's call him Bruce. Now, Bruce is the sweetest little boy. He is so cuddly and gets attached to people easily, but he struggles with friendships within the class. As a result of this, I naturally felt quite sorry for him, and so I had been spending quite a bit of time with him. Because Bruce gets attached to people easily, he stands with his body pressed to you as you talk, and he looks straight into your eyes. I felt a little uneasy when this first happened, but I tried not to show it because I was glad that he trusted me, so I let it continue without making him feel weird or unwanted. Now, as me and this other teacher were talking about Bruce, she mentions that he is the only student that scares her a little bit, and I asked her why. She told me that Bruce was no longer allowed pets, and once again, I asked why. Turns out, Bruce squished his poor hamster in his tiny little hands when he was a little younger and loved every second of it. I am not being rude, but I wouldn't be shocked if he does that to a person in future. All the attachment issues and total indifference to ending a life can't be a good mix.